That same day, once it started to get dark, the rays of the sun began to impact against the main building of the Garam Mage Association. Slowly Luna began to open her eyes, and with a surprised look she started to wonder what this feeling was. Her hand began to release blue mana. Her body felt lighter. It was as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. While her hand was surrounded by mana, she began to observe it, and her eyes filled with confusion as she did not know why she felt cyan more than usual. At the same time, in front of the main building of the Garam Mage Association were Karam and Cyan on the roof. Karam, who had her arms crossed, asked what he was trying to do. Cyan, who was sitting, began to observe the building and fell silent. With a serene look, he explained that he had thought he could use her later. It would be a shame for him to kill her. Karam started to look at him with an insecure glance, and she knew that he was doing charity work, not taking into account that he could be stabbed in the back later. Cyan started to look down and couldn't help but smile, as it was funny to hear that from someone like her. Karam got a little annoyed but still decided not to play along with him, since his body would eventually be hers. She just wanted him to take good care of himself. The rays of the sun began to fade slowly. Cyan started to stand up and decided it was time to leave, as there was nothing good about staying here too long. After a few hours, someone who had their hand resting on a table began to tap it with their finger. This person was Lunav's grandfather. She did not remember anything after being kidnapped, but someone had put her here. Lunav, who had her arms behind her back, started to look down at the ground with a lost gaze and confirmed this. She did not remember anything apart from this. Her grandfather, who had his head resting on his fist, slammed the table hard and with an angry look asked if she really thought he would believe this. The kingdom was in turmoil because of the blood banquet, and she was very unconcerned. The butler intervened, put his hand on his chest, bowed his head before him, and apologized, taking full responsibility. It had been his fault for not having looked for Lunav earlier. Lunav's grandfather stood up, began to walk towards them, and explained that this was not his fault, since she had acted on her own. The butler bowed his head before him, thanking him for his consideration. Raijans placed his hand on his shoulder, and with a calm look thanked him for always having to work hard for his granddaughter. He replied that he was just fulfilling his duties. According to Raijans, he had done well so far. At that moment, Raijans' hand began to emit powerful and intense flames. Upon feeling the heat of his hand, the butler panicked. Raijans' eyes filled with fury and his body began to emanate a murderous aura. He had known for a long time that the butler had betrayed them. He could not believe that he had thought he could get away with harming his granddaughter. Slowly, Raijans' hand started to burn the butler's clothes, and despite being in this situation, he remained calm, explaining that it had been a misunderstanding and asking for an opportunity to explain. Upon witnessing this, Lunav, who was next to him, could not help but be shocked. She did not know what was happening. Raijans' eye began to shine. He clenched his teeth tightly and ordered him to shut up, as listening to him speak was sickening. He began to use his power, causing the fire to slowly start entering the interior of the butler's body. Slowly it began to scorch all of his body, making him writhe in pain. Upon seeing this harsh scene, Lunav put her hand over her mouth and she couldn't help but remain terrified. She couldn't believe that her grandfather was so cruel. The butler, who had his body on fire, fell to his knees on the ground, and Raijans revealed that he was one of the people who had ordered her kidnapping. As the butler's body was slowly burning, Raijans began to clean his hand using a handkerchief, and with a serene look he asked her if she had discovered anything about Cyan Vert. Lunav's eyes filled with fear. She was sure that he knew the answer, but still she replied that she had not discovered anything special. The body of the butler fell to the ground. She began to look down with a lost gaze as she realized that such an obvious lie was not going to work. Raijans started walking towards her, asking what this was supposed to mean. Lunav didn't even lift her gaze and mentioned that in reality she had returned late because she was meeting with him. She had not been able to find anything special in the first meeting. Raijans put his hand on her shoulder, since this was not the answer he wanted to hear. With a penetrating look, he asked her what Cyan was hiding, causing the tension in the atmosphere to grow. His eyes filled with fury. Cyan was avert and Raijans was sure that he was hiding something, or perhaps someone was helping him. Lunav looked back at him, and she explained that he only had a guardian knight and a useless maid. There was nothing that linked him to the incident. Asked why he was so obsessed with Cyan. Raijans' body began to emit a suffocating purple aura. He approached her and with an angry look asked if she was asking questions, realizing that there was something about Cyan. She should not ask questions since she had been born as a rain reaver. All she should do was what he said. Lunav started to stare at him and she remained silent. Raijans, who had his arms behind his back, turned his back to her, closed his eyes, and gave her permission to leave if she had no answer. reminding her that she was not allowed to go outside for a while. She approached the body of the butler, which was on fire, her gaze filled with sadness. She was sick and tired of this house. The next day it dawned, and at Lewin Academy, Seth was sleeping like a log, who was not wearing a shirt and had his back against a door. In reality, he was sleeping in front of Cyan's bedroom door. He arrived, peeked around a corner, and upon seeing this bastard realized that he had not attended his classes. He decided to come back later. Cyan descended some stairs, and in front of him were several students who were talking about how the classes had been cancelled because the instructor had disappeared. The blonde girl assumed that this was not a big deal. Cyan approached them and upon hearing this, felt somewhat confused since he did not know what was happening. At that moment, someone revealed that the instructor named Nella Aranis had disappeared. Upon hearing the voice, Cyan began to turn his head back, and with an uncertain look he started to wonder if it belonged to Instructor Sarika. His assumption was correct. Sarika appeared and placed her hand on his shoulder, and while her body was surrounded by a sinister aura, she realized that he had been responsible. Cyan felt somewhat confused and asked what she was talking about. In response, she asked why he had killed the magical instructor. Cyan turned around, began to shake his hand in denial, and with a confident look defended himself by saying that he didn't even know that instructor. Sarika put her hand under her chin and remembered that Cyan skipped all his lessons, leaving poor Cyan shocked. She revealed that Nella Aranis was a talented mage from the Garam Kingdom. It was common for mages to come to Lewin, a neutral area, but there were rumors that she was against Raijan's Rainreaver, so they had been keeping an eye on her. While she had one hand on her waist, she adjusted her glasses with the other and closed her eyes. Lunav's kidnapping was not something they had ever expected. They were going to take action soon, but he had taken care of things for them. Cyan was absorbed in his thoughts. Now he understood why she seemed very familiar. Seeing that he was not paying attention, Sarika got angry. She leaned her back against the window and told Cyan not to worry since she was the only one who knew this. She decided to give him a new mission, so he had to stay out of the academy for a while. Cyan extended his hand towards her and asked who was going to replace the instructor. With a serious look, she assumed that the other teachers were going to take turns. They needed a new mage to fill her place, so the announcements were already published. At the same time, someone put their suitcase in a carriage that carried straw. The man wearing a black cap was very happy since he loved these views. The driver assumed that he was from the city. The driver was an old man. He turned his head towards him and asked what brought him so far away, to which the man replied that there was a job he wanted. This man was none other than Boris. He began to adjust his hat using his hand, and with a smile explained that he was in a hurry since he had heard that the position was available now. The old man was somewhat surprised, and upon seeing that he wanted to have a job at Lewin, he thought he was a teacher. Boris felt embarrassed and started to touch his hat. At the same time in the Lewin Academy, Emily was lying on the sofa. She was dying of boredom. In that moment, Karam, who had one hand resting on her waist, appeared, and with an angry look gave her the order to get up from the sofa, reminding her that this was her spot. Emily was lying on Karam's sofa. She paid no attention since this was Cyan's dorm and nothing here belonged to her. Karam lost patience and got angry. Not long after, Cyan arrived and opened the door, and when looking to one side saw something that caught his attention. Karam was sleeping on the sofa, and next to her was Emily sitting on the floor. She had her head full of bumps. Cyan was somewhat confused and asked what she was doing. Emily started crying, thinking that she looked very scary. Cyan caught Karam's attention by saying that they had a new mission. Upon hearing this, she woke up and asked if now. Emily started to raise her hand, as she also wanted to go. Cyan, who had one hand on his waist, began to point at her with the other and said that he had an important mission for her, leaving Emily speechless and full of curiosity. He started pointing towards Nana's room door, and with a serious look entrusted her with the mission of making sure that Nana was not hungry. Emily was somewhat disappointed since this wasn't important at all. She assumed that Cyan was just trying to get rid of her. At that moment, roars began to be heard from Nana's room, and a sinister aura appeared. Upon witnessing this, Emily panicked. She started to imagine Nana in draconic form and came to the conclusion that at this rate, it was going to happen again. Nana, who was hungry, slowly began to open the door and told Cyan that she was hungry. Once she fully opened the door, Emily put bread into her mouth. She started to eat and couldn't help but start to enjoy. Emily, who was holding a plate full of bread, turned her head back and with a determined look asked him not to worry about anything since she was going to take care of everything. Karam transformed, and Cyan gave a thumbs up to Emily and with a serious look decided to trust her. Emily closed her eyes and started to smile since she had confidence in her cooking. In the other room was Brian, who had a stomachache from eating Emily's food. Cyan asked her not to feed Brian since he was still recovering. Karam approached him, and with a confused look asked where they were going this time. Cyan turned his head towards her and with a calm look revealed that they were going to go southwest of the Ushif Empire, more precisely to Lambaster, a city of crime ruled by money and violence. At the same time in the city, a fight was taking place. People were excited and betting money on the fighters. In the ring there were two men, one huge and muscular and another who looked like an ordinary fighter. This fight was Zelbard versus Zaber. Zaber was shocked to see such a monster, while on the other side, Zelbard was only thinking about how to kill him. He started to stare intently at Zaber and couldn't help but smile. He didn't look like a human, he looked more like a zombie. While drool was falling from his mouth, he asked Zaber for his opinion, reminding him that the audience wanted him to be crushed. Zaber, filled with courage, adopted an offensive stance and asked him to stop talking and with a smile mocked him, calling him pig. The fight began and Zelbard launched a powerful punch, but Zaber jumped and dodged effortlessly, causing his fist to hit the ground. Zaber began to show a smile and mocked him by calling him slow. He decided to make him pay for having underestimated him. His smile faded when Zelbard grabbed his body using his hand. Now Zelbard began to smile and decided to kill him by crushing him. He started to exert force, and slowly Zaber began to feel a strong pain. Not long after, he crushed his body, causing him to open his mouth and start spitting blood. The fight ended with Zelbard as the winner, and he began to smile like a maniac. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.